Today's lesson is beatboxing, discovering your inner drummer. Hi, everybody. I'm Roger.
And I'm Helen.
And today we're talking about something called beatboxing. And, of course, that does have to do with rhythm. And if you don't really play the drums or you don't have room to have drums in your house or something, you could always try beatboxing.
Yes, beatboxing is an activity. It's a way of creating rhythm using your body, using your mouth. And it's also a way for you to discover your inner drummer. So a drummer is somebody who plays the drums. But you may not have to play the drums in order to be a drummer because maybe you can get into beatboxing. And to say that you want to discover your inner something, it means you have the potential to be a drummer, or you have the talent or the interest. It just hasn't come out yet. You could also say, for instance, I want to rediscover my inner child, even though I'm an adult already, but there's still a child inside me that loves to play, loves to paint and run in the fields, and I want to get back to those activities and discover my inner child.
Yeah, I think most people love the sound of a good rhythm, and they like to tap their feet to a song or snap their fingers or whatever. So beatboxing may be a way for you to become a drummer without actually going out and investing thousands of dollars in a fancy drum kit with all the drums and cymbals. So we're going to talk about beatboxing now. Let's introduce this topic by listening to the first part, and then we'll come back to break it down.
Beatboxing. Discovering your inner drummer. How can you turn your mouth and voice into a musical instrument? The obvious answer is by singing. But a more unconventional and elaborate way is by beatboxing.
大家好，第一部分我们来介绍形容词 unconventional， 它的意思是非同寻常的，或是非常规的，不依惯例的。例如 The engineer is good at finding unconventional solutions to technical problems. 那名工程师善于寻找非同寻常的方法来解决技术问题。又或者说 The artist took an unconventional approach to painting. 那位艺术家用非常规的方式作画。另外去掉这个字的字首 un 就会变成反义形容词 conventional， 它的意思是传统的或是惯例的。例如 Though the car runs on electricity, it has a very conventional body design. 虽然那辆车是电动的，但它的车身设计倒是很传统。又或者说 For many businesses, operating online is more efficient than opening a conventional shop. 对很多产业来说，在网络上营运比开设传统店面来得有效。
How can you turn your mouth and voice into a musical instrument? The obvious answer is by singing. So the first part of the lesson today begins with a question. And the question is, how do you use your mouth and your voice to create music? How do you use those two things as a musical instrument? So when you hear that question, your first response might be, well, I could sing because that requires using your mouth and your voice. However, there is another option, and that is beatboxing.
Right, singing is great. Of course, you can sing a song, like Tonight, tonight won't be just any night. That, of course, is singing to use your mouth and your voice as a musical instrument. But you can also do something more unconventional and more elaborate, and that is by beatboxing. So again, but a more unconventional and elaborate way is by beatboxing. If something's unconventional, it's not common, okay? It's just unusual. For example, my friend Ted has an unconventional way of sweeping the floor. You have to see it to believe it. He holds the broom in a special way. Nobody else sweeps a floor like that. So it's rather unconventional. It's unusual. And something's elaborate when it involves a lot of details.
Yeah, so my friend Jody has a very unconventional sense of style. She has blue hair and she has purple fingernails, and she also dresses in an elaborate way. So she wears clothing that's very colorful, has flowers on it. So she is unconventional and also elaborate.
Yeah, every time I see those temple festivals going past in the street, you see those big representations of various gods and generals. They always wear those very elaborate costumes with a lot of embroidery and details. and decorations and stuff like that. So beatboxing can be elaborate. There are lots of different things you can do to make different sounds with your lips and your mouth and your hands and your fingers. And we'll talk about that in the next part of our lesson. So let's move on and listen to it.
By manipulating their breath and positioning their lips and tongue in certain ways, a beatboxer can produce the deep, booming rhythms of a kick drum, the sharp patterns of a hi-hat, and even the rich tones of an electric piano or synthesizer. Sometimes beatboxers also use other body parts, like the hands, to create even more sound effects.
第二部分我们看到动词 manipulate， 它的意思是熟练的运用、操作，或是借由手或工具来控制。例如 The operator used the control panel to manipulate the crane. 该操作员使用控制面板来操作起重机。又或者说 Todd always manipulates his girlfriend to get what he wants. Todd 总是控制他的女朋友以得到他想要的。接下来我们看到形容词 booming， 这个字的意思是声音低沉洪亮、隆隆作响的，但也可以是繁荣的或是蓬勃发展的意思。例如Tom's booming voice always gets people's attention. Tom 低沉洪亮的嗓音总是受到人们瞩目。或是 The island's booming industrial development has many environmentalists worried. 那座岛上蓬勃的工业发展让许多环保人士感到忧心。下一个我们看到单字 rhythm， 它是名词，指的是节奏或是韵律。例如 I really like the rhythm of this song, but I think the words are a little boring. 我真的很喜欢这首歌的节奏，但我觉得歌词有点无聊。又或者说 The song's rhythm makes me want to dance. 这首歌的节奏让我想跳舞。
So now we're going to look at exactly how you can beatbox. By manipulating their breath and positioning their lips and tongue in certain ways, a beatboxer can produce the deep booming rhythms of a kick drum, the sharp patterns of a hi-hat, and even the rich tones of an electric piano or synthesizer. So first of all, a beatboxer has to manipulate their breath. To manipulate something means to handle something or to control something in a skillful way. So you could say, as an example, that an experienced pilot knows how to manipulate the plane, knows how to land it, knows how to make it take off in a skillful way so that he keeps all of the passengers safe. Here, beatboxers need to manipulate their breath because when you engage in beatboxing, you can't breathe normally as you would do if you're just walking down the street or eating. You do have to manipulate your breath in a certain way.
And of course, here we're talking about the booming rhythms of a kick drum. A kick drum can also be referred to as the bass drum, and you use your foot to kick a kind of lever or a mallet or something into the drum, and you get this booming sound. If something has a booming sound, it's very low, like a bass drum. And of course, you get the rhythms or patterns of those beats. That would be the bass drum or the kick drum. You can also get the sharp patterns of a hi-hat. Those are when two cymbals come together, also using your foot, like that. That's a hi-hat. And then, of course, you get some rich tones of an electric piano or a synthesizer, which I can't really do, but an electric piano, of course, is a piano that uses electricity or electronics to produce their sound. And a synthesizer, that creates all these kind of modern computer kinds of sounds that we're used to hearing in modern hit songs.
Right, so we usually associate beatboxing only with drums and with bass percussions, but actually beatboxing can also produce electric piano or synthesizer sounds. Now, sometimes beatboxers also use other body parts, like the hands, to create even more sound effects. So a beatboxer might use their hands to tap their throat or their mouth or their chest to create more sounds and more rhythms to enrich the sounds that they are making when they're beatboxing.
Right, they could clap their hands, they could snap their fingers or hit other parts of their bodies as well to create all these different kinds of sound effects to do that beatboxing, which most of us have heard before. And sometimes I guess they also have beatboxing competitions. I can do it a little bit as a demonstration. Let me see if I can do something here. That's kind of crude there, but you get the idea of what beatboxing is all about with that, hopefully. Okay, that brings us to the end of the second part of our lesson for today. Let's move on now to the third and final part. We will listen to it first.
Beatboxing as we know it today took off in New York in the 1980s as part of the rising hip-hop culture. Back then, beatboxers tried to mimic the sound of drum machines, also referred to as beatboxes, which is how beatboxing got its name. According to some academics, however, the roots of beatboxing can be traced back far further to ancient India and China, where similar techniques were considered a special type of vocal art. Wherever its origins, beatboxing is a neat way to make music. Best of all, it doesn't require anything but your body and a good sense of rhythm.
第三部分我们看到单字 academic， 它是名词，指的是学者或是大学教师。例如 Larry is the youngest academic in that college. Larry 是那所大学里最年轻的教师。或是A few of the academics at the university were not happy about the changes in the grading system. 该大学的一些教授对评分系统的更动并不满意。最后补充 academic 也可以做形容词使用，它的意思是学术的或是学院的。例如 Billy's academic performance didn't meet the university's strict standards. Billy 的学术成绩并没有达到这所大学的严格标准。再举一个例子 The university has very high academic standards. 这所大学有很高的学术水平。
Now we're going to look a little bit at the history of beatboxing. Beatboxing, as we know it today, took off in New York in the 1980s as part of the rising hip-hop culture. So we know that beatboxing originated in New York in the 1980s, and it took off there in New York as well. To take off means to become popular and successful. And not only did beatboxing originate in New York, it was created there, it also became popular in New York. I could also say that somebody's career took off after they entered a particular company or after they starred in a movie. An actor's career took off after he starred in a Steven Spielberg movie. You can also say a plane took off. That means the plane went from the ground to the sky. So that's a different meaning of take off, but it also uses this phrasal verb form.
Exactly. So beatboxing that we know today began or took off way back in New York in the 1980s, and it was part of the rising hip-hop culture that was popular at the time, and I believe graffiti was also quite popular at the time. They kind of existed at the same time, and they also had break dancing, which is all part of this new culture that popped up or took off in New York way back in the 1980s. And back then, beatboxers tried to mimic the sound of drum machines, also referred to as beatboxes, which is how beatboxing got its name. So back at the time, they used these devices called beat boxes. I don't really believe they use them anymore because they can use computers and stuff. But back then, computers were not common, so they had this special kind of musical instrument. It was electronic, kind of like a synthesizer, but it was called a beatbox. And they mimicked the sound of a beatbox. To mimic just means to copy something, especially if it involves looking like something or sounding like that thing.
Yes, so these beatboxes were really drum machines, but they were also referred to as beatboxes. So these devices had two names. Originally, they were called drum machines, but they were referred to as beatboxes as well. When you refer to something as something else, you're simply calling it by another name. So I could say, for instance, even though my name is Helen, my friends always refer to me as Joey.
Why is that?
Because that's the name that got stuck with me when I was a kid.
Okay, sometimes we just don't know the origin of nicknames there, but you're referred to as Joey by your friends sometimes, even though your name is Helen. And in this particular case, yes, drum machines are also referred to as beat boxes. Again, they are special kinds of musical instruments that have drum beats in them. You can create drum beats artificially without having to actually have the drums themselves. It's kind of similar to those electronic electronic drum kits that we see sometimes. If you don't have room for a drum kit in your house and you don't want to disturb the neighbors, you can buy these electronic drums that you can listen to on headphones, or you can put them through speakers if you want to hear it that way. So that's how beatboxing got its name from those devices. And according to some academics, however, the roots of beatboxing can be traced back far further to ancient India and China, where similar techniques were considered a special type of vocal art. So we have academics. These are people who work in universities as professors or whatever, and they're doing research on this very topic. And they've done some research and they found out, well, beatboxing may have had its modern start in New York City back in the 1980s, but, well, it seems like people in India and China were doing similar things, and they were considered special types of vocal art. So here, vocal just refers having to do with your voice.
Yes, and academics were studying the roots of beatboxing. Now, academics refer to people who teach or do research in colleges and universities. So you wouldn't really consider a high school teacher an academic, but you would consider a college or university professor an academic. So these academics trace the roots of beatboxing back to ancient India and China. When you trace the root of something back to something else, you're discovering the origin of that thing, when it originated, when it was created.
For example, we could say humanity, human beings, can be traced back to Africa. We all have ancestors from Africa. It is the mother continent. But in this particular case, some academics say that beatboxing or a similar art form can be traced back to ancient India and ancient China because they had similar types of vocal art. Now, here in the final part of our lesson for today, it says, wherever its origins, beatboxing is a neat way to make music. Now, something's neat when it's really cool, it's really special. Neat can also mean you're well-groomed, for example. Sometimes if you've been out hiking all day and you're sweaty, well, you're not going to look very neat. So what you need to do is go take a shower and comb your hair and trim your fingernails and stuff like that. Then you will look nice and neat.
Yes, so beatboxing is a neat, interesting way to make music. Best of all, though, it doesn't require anything but your body and a good sense of rhythm. So here the phrase best of all is used when you want to introduce something that is better than all of the other things that you have already mentioned. So we mentioned that beatboxing has a long history. Beatboxing is a way to create many different sounds and rhythms. But best of all, that is, the thing that's best about beatboxing is that you don't need any instruments because you only need to use your body and you need to have a good sense of rhythm. Because if you don't have a good sense of rhythm, then your beatboxing is probably going to come out sounding choppy and uninteresting.
And it might be embarrassing if you try to do this yourself around other people. They'll be wondering, what the heck are you doing? And you can say, well, I'm trying to perfect my beatboxing style so that I can enter a contest, a competition or something like that. And again, you should have a good sense of rhythm if you want to do this. If you don't have a good sense of rhythm, then you're probably not going to sound very good doing it. Okay, that brings us to the end of our discussion for today. Let's turn things over now to our Chinese teacher.
各位同学大家好，我是 Hanny。 我们来看今天的文法重点。课文第一部分提到要将口腔和声音变成一种乐器，一种较不寻常而且复杂的方式是透过节奏口技 beatboxing。 好，那文中它用到形容词 elaborate 来描述复杂的。那我们来学它的字首字根。好， labor labor 它有工作、劳动、劳工或是劳力的意思。那带有这个字根的字呢，多半就含有劳动劳力的意思咯。我们看到在 elaborate 这个字当中，它的字首 e 是来自 ex 表示彻底完全，是做强调用。那么字根 labor 表示劳动， ate 可以是动词字尾或者是形容词字尾。好，那么当我们做事情做得很彻底，应该就可以联想到 elaborate 带有那种精心制作的语义。特别注意就是它当动词是念作 elaborate elaborate 表示精心制作、详细说明。那么当形容词念作 elaborate 表示精心计划的、精雕细琢的，或是复杂的、繁复的。好，我们也补充2个有相同字根的单字。第一个是 collaborate， 它的字首 COL 是来自 COM， 只是因为 COM 碰到 L 开头的字根才拼成 COL。 那这个字首表示一起， labor 是工作， ATE 是动词字尾，那一起工作就表示合作，所以 collaborate 它有一起合作、共同合作的意思。第二个补充的是 laborious， 它的字根 labor 表示劳动，那么后面它是加上 IOUS， 那这个 OUS 它是形容词字尾，同学们就可以试着联想，某件事它是需要劳动的，那就表示它是费力的、吃力的，所以 laborious 就可以形容是费劲的、吃力的。好，那我们读到课文第2部分的第1句，他说透过以特定方式控制呼吸和放置嘴唇和舌头的位置，节奏口技表演者可以产生大鼓深沉洪亮的节奏啊，脚踏拔尖锐等等等等等。那么文中它就是用到动词 manipulate 去表达说运用、操作，像熟练的运用什么什么东西。那这个单字它也有操纵啊、控制的意思。我们来学它的字根。MAN 或者是拼作 MANI 或者是拼作 MANU 这一类字根呢，它是指用手做的意思。那么像 manual 它就是由 MANU 加上形容词字尾 AL 合在一起， manual 就是形容手工的。好，那我们看到在 manipulate 这个字当中，它的字根 MANI 它表示手， PUL 表示充满，那么 ATE 是动词字尾。那同学们可以把手联想成魔掌，把魔掌伸到每一个角落，事事都要介入，暗中操控，所以 manipulate 就有操控啊、操纵、摆布的意思咯。好，那也补充2个有这一类字根的单字。第一个是 manuscript， 它的字根 MANU 表示手， script 表示书写，合在一起 manuscript 就是表达手稿、原稿、手抄本。那第2个补充的是 emancipate， 它的字首 E 表示离开，字根 MAN 表示手，然后呢 CIP 是拿取，ATE 是动词字尾。好，我们刚刚说了离开手，然后拿取，再搭配动词字尾。那我们现在可以把这个手联想成对某人或某事物的掌控、拥有权。那把这只手拿开来，就表示解放。我们用这样去联想说 emancipate 它有解放、使不受束缚的意思。好，那么以上今天重点整理，我们回顾今天单字吧。
Unconventional. Mrs. Wood's teaching style may be unconventional, but it has proven quite effective. Elaborate. My mother made an elaborate meal to celebrate my father's birthday. Manipulate. The best soccer players can manipulate a ball with ease. Booming. Echoing through the valley was the booming sound of thunder. Rhythm. Clapping their hands to the beat, the crowd moved to the rhythm of the music. Academic. The academic presented her study at the math department's weekly meeting. Vocal. By doing vocal exercises, the singer was able to prepare for the performance.
Discussion starter starts now!
Here's our discussion starter for today. The question is, do you think you would like to give beatboxing a try? Why or why not?
No, since I don't think I have a good sense of rhythm at all. I can hardly dance, I can hardly keep the rhythm when I'm singing. Therefore, I don't think I'm likely to try beatboxing because it would come out awful. Roger, do you think you would like to give beatboxing a try?
Well, for the sake of this discussion, I'm going to say yes, I'd like to give beatboxing a try because I think I do have a good sense of rhythm. And yes, back in high school, I did study how to play the drums for a while, so I know some basic rhythms with the hi-hat and the snare drum and the bass and all that kind of stuff. And I think that stuff can easily be done with the voice. Like you can make a bass drum sound, boom, 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 and hi-hats, stuff like that. So I already know how to do it a little bit, but you know, it would take a little practice to become better in order to enter some type of competition.
Well, everyone, today's article has come to an end, and I sure hope you enjoy reading along with us. I am Helen.
I am Roger.
See you next time.